The film begins with Lydia Dietz filming an episode of her paranormal talk show, Ghost House, where she interviews people who claim their houses are haunted, since Lydia can see ghosts and investigates the claims. During one taping, she's startled by what seems to be Beetlejuice in the audience. After the show, she talks to her boyfriend and manager, Rory. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia tries to take pills to calm down, but Rory throws them away, except for 2 that he retrieves at her request. Lydia then receives frantic calls and texts from her stepmother, Delia, over bad news. Lydia visits Delia at her art gallery, where Delia has become a famous artist. Delia informs Lydia that her father, Charles, has died in a plane crash in the ocean. Although he survived the crash, he was eaten by a shark. They start planning to return to Winter River for Charles's funeral. In the afterlife, Beetlejuice works in a department with other shrunken head figures. Meanwhile, a ghost janitor accidentally revives the remains of a woman named Dolores, who pieces herself together and staples her body parts. Once restored, she grabs the ghost janitor and demands to know Beetlejuice's whereabouts. When he doesn't respond, she sucks out his soul, leaving him an empty skin bag. Lydia and Delia go to find Lydia's daughter, Astrid, who is teased at school for being strange and has a strained relationship with Lydia because she feels her mother spends more time with ghosts than with her. At Astrid's school, Delia makes a dramatic announcement of Charles's death. Astrid is shocked by the news of her grandfather's passing but gets into an argument with Lydia, as they had never really discussed the death of Astrid's father, Richard, who died in a river in South America. Beetlejuice is summoned by Wolf Jackson, a former actor who is now a ghost detective. Wolf confronts Beetlejuice about the appearance of Dolores, which makes Beetlejuice uneasy. He reveals that Dolores was his wife when he was alive, and they met while he was a grave robber. After their marriage, Dolores, the leader of a soul-sucking cult, tricked him into drinking poison. Before dying, Beetlejuice dismembered her, and now he knows she is seeking revenge. When Beetlejuice learns Lydia is returning to Winter River, he sees it as his chance to escape. The Dietz women arrive in Winter River and stay at Lydia's old house on the hill. At the funeral, Rory proposes to Lydia in front of everyone, despite her clear reluctance, and Astrid openly expresses her dislike for Rory. Lydia hesitantly agrees to the proposal. Upset, Astrid rides her bike around town, eventually crashing through a fence and hitting a tree, where she meets a boy named Jeremy Fraser in his treehouse. They bond for a moment as Astrid tells Jeremy that Lydia is her mother. Later, Astrid goes to the attic and finds the Old Town model, as well as a pamphlet for Beetlejuice, designed to trick her into saying his name. Lydia stops her just in time. However, Rory tries his fake New Age methods on Lydia and says Beetlejuice's name 3 times, transporting himself and Lydia into the model, where she comes face to face with the demon again. Beetlejuice scares Rory by showing his nightmare face before Lydia manages to return them to the real world. Astrid goes to Jeremy's house and discovers he owns a handbook for the recently deceased, which he claims to have found at a yard sale in town. They make plans to hang out at his place on Halloween night. On the day of the wedding, Astrid has Lydia drive her to Jeremy's house. Upstairs in his room, Jeremy charms Astrid, and they share a kiss, only to find themselves floating. Jeremy reveals he is a ghost who died falling from the treehouse. He asks for Astrid's help to bring him back to life, promising that she'll be able to see her father again. Meanwhile, Lydia speaks with a real estate agent who mentions that Jeremy's house hasn't been sold because it's known as a murder house. The agent reveals that 23 years ago, Jeremy killed his parents and fell from the treehouse to his death before the police could arrest him. Realizing Astrid is in danger, Lydia rushes back to Jeremy's house. Jeremy convinces Astrid to read an incantation from the handbook, which opens a portal to the afterlife. Lydia arrives too late, as Astrid has already followed Jeremy through the door. With no other choice, a desperate Lydia returns to the house and summons Beetlejuice. He's thrilled to have the love of his afterlife, bringing him back, but when Lydia tells him she needs his help to save Astrid, he agrees, on the condition that Lydia marries him so he can escape Dolores. Lydia reluctantly agrees. Beetlejuice blows open a door to the afterlife and leaves one of the shrunken head guys, Bob, to cover for him in case anyone comes looking. Meanwhile, Delia is in the backyard performing a ritual to honor Charles using 2 asps that she believed were defanged. She's proven wrong when both snakes bite her neck, and she collapses, dead. Jeremy reveals his true intentions to Astrid. He tricked her into giving up her life for his. He leaves her to board the Soul Train, while he goes to get his pass stamped. However, Astrid is spotted by Richard, who runs after her. Lydia arrives just in time to stop Astrid from getting on the train, but when they exit through an emergency door, they end up on one of Saturn's moons, the home of the sandworm. The creature emerges and chases them, but Richard pulls them to safety. Meanwhile, Dolores continues her afterlife killing spree, sucking out another ghost soul. She arrives at Beetlejuice's department and finds no one. Jackson interrogates Bob, who is disguised as Beetlejuice, but after Jackson leaves, Dolores finds Bob and steals his soul too. Lydia and Astrid reunite with Richard and briefly bond before rushing to stop Jeremy from getting his pass stamped. When they arrive, it seems they are too late, and Jeremy taunts them. However, the ghost who stamped the pass turns out to be Beetlejuice, and the stamp reads, "Shit out of luck." Beetlejuice pulls a lever, sending Jeremy through a trapdoor straight to hell. Delia finds herself in the afterlife's waiting room, unable to accept that she's dead. She calls on Beetlejuice to help her return to the living world, and he's more than happy to assist. After saying goodbye to Richard, Lydia and Astrid return to the living world, where Astrid apologizes for how she treated Lydia. They then realize the wedding is happening soon, and Lydia decides to go through with it. At the chapel, Beetlejuice shows up with Delia to stop the ceremony. He injects Rory with a truth serum, forcing Rory to confess that he never believed in Lydia's paranormal abilities and was only marrying her for her money. Beetlejuice gives Lydia a glove, which she uses to punch Rory across the room. Beetlejuice then attempts to push his wedding with Lydia forward by trapping the other guests inside their phones, distorting their faces. He launches into an over-the-top musical performance, even freezing Jackson and his ghost cops in place. However, Dolores arrives to interrupt the proceedings. Meanwhile, Astrid grabs the handbook, searching for a loophole and a way to get help. She draws a door on the floor that leads to Saturn's moon, summoning the sandworm. Beetlejuice narrowly avoids being eaten again by directing the sandworm toward Rory and Dolores, who are devoured instead. Just as Beetlejuice is about to finish the wedding, Astrid discovers a loophole. The marriage contract is void because Beetlejuice brought Lydia into the afterlife while she was still alive. Lydia says his name 3 times, causing him to inflate like a balloon and burst. Once Jackson unfreezes, he informs Lydia and Astrid that he must take Delia back to the afterlife. Delia bids them farewell, promising to haunt them until she's ready to cross over. They reaffirm their love for her. In the afterlife, Delia reunites with Charles, or at least the parts of him that weren't eaten. Later, Lydia records the final episode of Ghost House, as she retires to spend more time with Astrid. The two plan a trip to Transylvania, where Astrid seems attracted to a boy dressed as Dracula. The scene cuts to Astrid getting married and later giving birth, but the baby turns out to be a monstrous Beetlejuice, who kills the doctors. Lydia wakes up from this nightmare, only to find Beetlejuice beside her. She wakes up again, revealing it was another nightmare, suggesting she's still not free of him yet. So that's the end of our movie. If you've come this far, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe my channel. See you later.